He was dating me and my sister at the same time. She stayed. I made sure he lost everything. This story begins at someone else's wedding. It was a Saturday evening in October in a vineyard outside of Nashville, Tennessee. String lights overhead, white tablecloths, the specific warmth of a room full of people who are genuinely happy for the two people at the center of it. The kind of wedding you attend and think, this is what it's supposed to look like. A woman named Reese was there as a guest, 32 years old, a marketing director, a person who laughed easily and trusted carefully, and had spent the last 8 months believing she had finally found someone worth trusting. His name was Connor, and he was standing across the room, near the bar, with his arm around a woman Reese recognized immediately. Her sister, Lauren, 29 years old, laughing at something Connor had just said, her head tilted toward him in the way Reese had seen 100 times. The specific body language of a woman who is comfortable, who is close, who is not a stranger. Reese stood at the edge of the room for 47 seconds. She counted later, when she was trying to piece together what her body had known before her mind caught up. 47 seconds of watching Connor's hand on her sister's back, of watching Lauren lean into him, of understanding, with the specific clarity that arrives when something you suspected but refused to name finally has a shape. Exactly what she was looking at. Then she picked up her champagne glass, walked to the bar, and ordered a sparkling water. She was not ready to move yet, but she was already thinking. Before I tell you what Reese did next, and what she built over the following 6 weeks that Connor never saw coming, tell me where you're watching from tonight. And if you've ever stood in a room and understood something in your body before your mind could catch up, write yes in the comments. Because this story is for you. Subscribe and stay with me. Because what Reese did with 47 seconds of clarity changed everything. Let me tell you about Connor Walsh. He was 35, a commercial real estate developer in Nashville, the kind of man who moved through rooms with the easy confidence of someone who had learned, very early, that confidence was its own credential. He was charming in the specific way of people who study what each person needs and deliver it with apparent effortlessness. He remembered details. He followed up. He made you feel like the most interesting person in the room. And then, later, you would realize that he made everyone feel that way, and the feeling would curdle slightly. Reese had met him at a work event 8 months before the wedding. A rooftop networking event in May, the kind where everyone pretends they are not networking. Connor had asked her about a project she mentioned in passing, and actually listened to the answer, which distinguished him from approximately 90% of the people she had spoken to that evening. They had exchanged numbers. He had texted the following morning. They had dinner 4 days later. Reese was careful with people. She had learned to be, not from a single dramatic lesson, but from the accumulated experience of someone who had extended trust a few times too quickly and paid for it in ways that were difficult to name. She watched Connor for signs of performance. She tested his consistency. She waited for the version of him that appeared when he was tired or stressed or not trying to impress. The version that appeared was, as far as she could tell, the same version. Connor was steady in the way she had been looking for. He remembered that she didn't like cilantro. He showed up when he said he would. He did not make her feel like she was too much or not enough, which was rarer than it should have been. 8 months in, she had begun to believe he was who he appeared to be. She had not told her sister about him yet. Not because she was hiding anything. Reese and Lauren had never been the kind of sisters who shared everything immediately. They were close in the way of people who had grown up in the same house and emerged as fundamentally different people who loved each other despite the differences. Lauren was warmer, more social, quicker to open. Reese was more measured, more private, slower to trust. She had been planning to introduce them at Thanksgiving, 6 weeks away. She never got the chance. Stay with me to learn what Reese found at that vineyard rewrote 8 months of memory in 47 seconds. The wedding was for a colleague of Reese's named Maya. 200 guests, a vineyard venue, an open bar, and a seating chart that had placed Reese at a table near the back, with people she liked, but didn't know well. Connor had told her 2 days earlier that he had a work commitment that weekend. A client event, out of town, unavoidable. He had been apologetic in the practiced way of someone who had said this kind of thing before and knew the right register. Reese had accepted it without suspicion. Connor occasionally had weekend work obligations. This was not unusual. What was unusual was seeing him at the vineyard. She had spotted him before he spotted her. A gift, she would think later, that gave her those 47 seconds. He were near the bar, in a dark jacket she recognized, talking to a group of people she didn't know. And then Lauren had appeared from the direction of the restrooms, had slipped her hand into Connor's with the casual ease of someone who had done it many times before. And Connor had turned toward her with a smile that Reese recognized. It was the smile he used when he was comfortable, when he was not performing. She stood very still and she thought, how long? Not, is this what it looks like? She knew what it looked like. She thought, how long has this been happening, and how did I not know? The sparkling water she had ordered was cold in her hand. She sipped it and watched for 3 more minutes. Connor and Lauren moved through the room together with the ease of people who had been together long enough to have a rhythm. He introduced her to someone. She laughed. He touched the small of her back. Reese set down her glass. She found Maya, hugged her, told her she was radiant, which was true. She found her table. She ate dinner and made conversation and laughed at the right moments. She watched Connor and Lauren from across the room without appearing to watch them, which was easier than it should have been. At 9:15, Lauren went to the restroom alone. Reese followed. The restroom was empty except for the two of them. Lauren saw her in the mirror first, saw the reflection of her sister standing in the doorway, and her face did something complicated. Not guilt, exactly. Something that already knew. Reese, she said. How long? Reese said. Not a question. Lauren turned around. Her hands were at her sides. 3 months. 3 months. Connor and Reese had been together for 8. Connor and Lauren had been together for 3. The overlap was 5 months of something Reese did not yet have a word for. Does he know about me? Reese asked. Lauren's expression answered before she did. Yes. The room was very quiet. The sound of the wedding filtered through the walls. Music, laughter, the specific warmth of a room full of happy people. I didn't know how to tell you, Lauren said. I kept telling myself I would, and then I didn't. And then it had been too long, and I... Stop, Reese said, quietly, without anger because the anger had not arrived yet. It was coming. She could feel it, but it was not there yet. She looked at her sister for a long moment. What are you going to do? She asked. Lauren was quiet. Then, I don't know. Reese nodded once. She turned and walked back into the wedding. She stayed for another 40 minutes. She danced once with Maya's father, who had no idea what was happening and was simply a man who loved to dance. She said her goodbyes. She drove home. In the parking lot, before she started the car, she sat in the dark and thought about Connor, about 8 months of consistency, and remembered details and the smile he used when he was not performing. She thought, he knew about me the whole time. Then she started the car. Stay with me, because what Reese did when she got home that night is where this story really begins. Connor called at 11:43. Reese was sitting at her kitchen table with a glass of water she wasn't drinking, her phone face up in front of her. She had been expecting the call. Lauren had clearly told him. She answered on the third ring. Reese. His voice had the specific quality of someone who has prepared an explanation and is now delivering it. I need to talk to you. I know, she said. What you saw tonight, it's complicated. I know how it looks, but I need you to let me explain. She waited. He talked for 11 minutes. She timed it. He said the situation with Lauren had developed unexpectedly. He said he had been meaning to end one of the relationships, but hadn't found the right moment. He said he cared about both of them, which he seemed to believe was a mitigating factor rather than an aggravating one. He said he was sorry. He said it several times, in several different ways, each version slightly more refined than the last. Reese listened to all of it. When he finished, she said, Did you tell Lauren about me before tonight? A pause. She knew I was seeing someone. That's not what I asked. Another pause. She knew your name. And she stayed anyway, Reese said. He didn't answer. I have one question, Reese said, and I need you to answer it honestly because I will find out either way. Okay. Is there anyone else? The silence lasted 4 seconds. 4 seconds was its own answer. No, he said. She noted the pause. She noted the word. She noted that he had answered a different question than the one she asked. She had asked if there was anyone else, and he had said no. But the 4-second pause suggested the question had required more consideration than a true no would require. Thank you for calling, she said. And she ended the call. She sat at the kitchen table for another hour. Then she opened her laptop. Type calculating in the comments because Reese was not done. Not even close. Reese was a marketing director. Her entire professional life was built around research, pattern recognition, and the ability to construct a narrative from fragmentary information. She was very good at her job. She spent the week after the wedding applying those skills to Connor Walsh. She began with what she knew. Connor was a commercial real estate developer. He had a business partner named Derek Simmons. They had been partners for 6 years. The company had a good reputation in Nashville's development community. Reliable, professional, the kind of firm that got invited to bid on projects that mattered. She reached out, through a professional contact, to a woman named Angela who had worked at a competing firm and knew the Nashville development scene well. She framed the conversation as professional interest. She asked about Connor Walsh's reputation. Angela was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Professional reputation is solid. Personal reputation is complicated." Reese asked what she meant. Angela said she had heard things, not specific enough to repeat as fact, but a pattern. Connor had a way of moving through relationships, professional and personal, that left people feeling managed rather than respected. There was a woman, 2 years ago, who had left the industry after a situation involving Connor that no one talked about directly. "What kind of situation?" Reese asked. Angela didn't know the details, but she knew the woman's name, Priya Mehta. She had left Nashville and moved to Atlanta. Reese found Priya through LinkedIn. She sent a careful message, not asking for information, just introducing herself, saying she had heard Priya's name in the context of Connor Walsh, and that she had recently had her own experience that had raised questions. Priya responded within 2 hours. They spoke for 90 minutes. What Priya told her was detailed, specific, and documented. 2 years earlier, she had been a junior partner on a development project that Connor had managed. Over the course of the project, Connor had used their professional relationship to build a personal one, had made representations to her about his availability and intentions that were false, and had, when she had raised concerns about certain financial irregularities in the project accounting, suggested that pursuing those concerns would be professionally damaging for her. She had left Nashville rather than fight it. She had not had documentation sufficient to act on the financial concerns, but she had kept records. "I have emails," Priya told Reese. "I have a timeline. I have a text message where he explicitly asks me not to raise the accounting issue with Derek." "Would you be willing to share them?" Reese asked. A pause. Then, "With the right person, yes." Reese had spent a week doing research. She now had something more valuable than anger. She had a pattern, a witness, and documentation. She also had, as it turned out, a connection she hadn't expected. Derek Simmons, Connor's business partner, had a sister who worked at Reese's company. Not a close colleague, but someone Reese knew well enough to have coffee with occasionally. Someone who, when Reese reached out with a carefully framed question about Derek's character, responded with unexpected candor. "Derek is a good person," the sister said. "He's been worried about Connor for a while. There's something going on with the accounts that Derek can't quite pin down." Reese asked if Derek would be open to a conversation. "Don't go anywhere," because the conversation between Reese and Derek changed everything. Derek Simmons met Reese for coffee on a Thursday morning, 11 days after the Vineyard wedding. He arrived 5 minutes early, which told her something. He ordered black coffee, which told her something else. He listened to everything she said without interrupting, which told her the most. She told him about the relationship, about Lauren, about the 4-second pause, about Priya Mehta and the accounting concerns and the text message asking Priya not to raise the issue. Derek set down his coffee cup. "How long have you had this?" he asked. 11 days. He looked at her for a moment. You put this together in 11 days. I had motivation, she said. He almost smiled. What do you want to happen? Reese had been thinking about this question for 11 days. She had thought about it while running in the mornings, while sitting in meetings she wasn't fully present for, while lying awake at 2 a.m., with the specific wakefulness of someone whose mind refuses to stop working. She did not want Connor to suffer dramatically. She did not want a confrontation, a scene, anything that would require her to perform emotions in front of him. What she wanted was precise. She wanted the version of Connor that had been presented to her, reliable, consistent, trustworthy, to be seen clearly by the people who were making decisions based on that version. I want the people who are working with him to have accurate information, she said. What they do with it is up to them. Derek nodded slowly. The accounting issue is something I've been trying to get to the bottom of for 4 months. If Priya's documentation supports what I've been seeing, it does, Reese said. I've reviewed it. He looked at her again with that expression, the one that said he was recalibrating his understanding of who he was sitting across from. You reviewed financial documentation in 11 days? I have a background in analytics, she said, and I was motivated. They met twice more over the following 2 weeks. Priya connected directly with Derek's attorney. The documentation was reviewed, verified, and assembled into a formal record. Derek initiated an internal audit of the partnership accounts, something he had the legal right to do and had been building toward for months, but had lacked the specific trigger to act on. What the audit found was not catastrophic in a criminal sense. Connor had been careful, but it was sufficient. Sufficient to establish a pattern of misrepresentation to clients. Sufficient to trigger notifications to 2 development boards on which Connor held positions, and sufficient to give Derek the grounds he needed to dissolve the partnership. The dissolution was announced quietly, through legal channels, on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after the Vineyard wedding. By Wednesday, 3 clients had requested account reviews. By Thursday, Connor's membership on one of the development boards had been suspended pending review. By Friday, the professional network that had sustained his business for 6 years had begun the specific, quiet process of recalibration that happens when someone's reliability is called into question by people who have standing to call it. Connor called Reese on Friday evening. She did not answer. She had nothing left to say to him. The work was done. The record was accurate. The people who needed accurate information had it. She made dinner, poured a glass of wine, and watched something on television that she would not be able to remember afterward. Type done in the comments. Because that Friday evening, Reese was finally, completely done. Lauren called 3 weeks after the Vineyard. Then again, a week after that. Then a voicemail, which Reese listened to once and did not return. In the voicemail, Lauren said she had ended things with Connor. She said she understood why Reese wasn't answering. She said she was sorry, not for the first time, but in a different way than the restroom at the Vineyard, with more distance and less self-protection. Reese sat with the voicemail for a long time. The anger at Lauren was different from the anger at Connor. Connor had been a stranger who had performed trustworthiness. His betrayal was the betrayal of a con, calculated and deliberate. Lauren was her sister. Lauren had known about Reese for 3 months and had chosen, every day of those 3 months, not to say anything. That was not a con. That was a choice, made by someone who knew exactly what they were choosing. Reese had spent 32 years being Lauren's sister. She had driven 2 hours to help Lauren move apartments. She had sat with her through a difficult breakup at 24 that had lasted 6 months longer than it should have. She had been the person Lauren called at 3 a.m. when things were bad, and she had answered every time. Lauren had known about Reese for 3 months, and she had stayed. Reese did not call back. She did not text. She did not send a message saying she needed time, or that the door was closed, or anything that would give Lauren a framework for what was happening. She simply did not respond, which was its own kind of answer. Her mother called twice. Her aunt called once. The family, sensing a rupture without knowing the details, attempted the usual interventions: holiday plans, group messages, the gentle social pressure of people who prefer harmony to honesty. Reese attended Thanksgiving. She was civil and present, and did not make the day about what had happened. Lauren was not there. She had told their mother she was spending the holiday with friends, which was, Reese suspected, a form of retreat. At Christmas, Lauren came home. They were in the same house for 2 days. They spoke when spoken to, and did not speak otherwise. Their mother watched them with the expression of someone who understands that something has broken and does not know how to ask about it. On the second evening, Lauren came to Reese's room and knocked. Reese opened the door. "I know you're not ready," Lauren said. "I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know that I understand why." Reese looked at her sister, this woman she had known her entire life, whose face she could read from across a room, whose specific laugh she could identify in a crowd. And she felt the specific grief of losing something that had always been there. "I know you do," she said. She closed the door gently. Not a slam. She was not angry in that way, not anymore. Just a door, closing, softly and completely. There are 2 betrayals in this story, and they are not the same. Connor's betrayal was a system. He had built 2 relationships simultaneously, with full knowledge of both, and maintained them through the specific work of compartmentalization, keeping the 2 women from talking to each other, managing the schedules and the stories and the details that had to remain separate for the system to function. When it collapsed because he had underestimated one of the people inside it. He had assumed Reese would be hurt and angry, and that her response would be emotional. He had not anticipated that her response would be methodical. He had not anticipated Priya, or Derek, or the 11 days of research, or the coffee meeting on a Thursday morning. He had not anticipated that the woman he had managed for 8 months was, in fact, unmanageable. Lauren's betrayal was simpler and, in some ways, harder. She had made a choice, not once, but every day for 3 months. She had chosen to stay in something she knew was wrong, and she had chosen to let her sister remain in the dark about it. That choice had a cost, and the cost was the relationship she had always had with Reese, which had been built on a version of Lauren that turned out to be incomplete. Reese did not hate her sister. She was not sure she ever would. But she understood, with the clarity that comes after the anger has passed, that she could not go back to the version of the relationship that existed before the vineyard. That version had been built on an incomplete picture. The complete picture required a different structure, maybe a smaller one, maybe a more distant one, maybe one that existed on different terms than the one they had always had. What Reese had built in the 6 weeks after the vineyard was not revenge in the way people usually mean that word. She had not set out to destroy Connor. She had set out to ensure that the people working with him had accurate information about who they were working with. What they did with that information was their decision. The audit, the board notifications, the partnership dissolution. None of that was Reese's doing. It was the consequence of Connor's own choices, surfaced by people who had standing to surface them. She had simply connected the dots. She had been very good at it. If there is a lesson, and Reese would say there are two, the first is about research. Know who you are dealing with. Not because everyone is hiding something, but because the information is usually available and the cost of not having it can be significant. The second lesson is about the people who knew and stayed silent. They are not always villains. Sometimes they are people you love, making choices they will regret, for reasons that make sense to them in the moment and make less sense later. That does not mean the choices are forgivable. It means they are human. And human beings, Reese has found, are capable of both more and less than you expect. She expected less from Connor. She got exactly what she expected. She expected more from Lauren. She got less. And that is the wound that will take longest to close. It is March now, 5 months since the vineyard. Reese's apartment is the same apartment it was in October, but it feels different in the specific way that spaces feel different after you have been through something in them. She rearranged the living room in November. Nothing dramatic, just the furniture in a configuration that suited her better, that she had wanted for months, but had been delaying for reasons she can no longer remember. She has a standing Thursday coffee with Derek Simmons, which began as a professional courtesy and has become something more like friendship, the unexpected kind that arrives through unlikely circumstances and turns out to be genuine. He is a good person, as his sister said. Reese finds she is glad to know him. Priya Mehta is still in Atlanta. They text occasionally. Reese sent her a bottle of wine when the partnership dissolution was announced. Priya sent back a voice memo that lasted 40 seconds and made Reese laugh for the first time in weeks. Connor is still in Nashville. His career is not destroyed. He is too careful for that, and the consequences of his choices, while significant, are the kind that operate at the level of reputation rather than ruin. He is working, but differently. The specific ease with which he once moved through professional rooms has been replaced by something more careful, more managed, which is, Reese thinks, probably how it should have been all along. Lauren is in Nashville too. Reese sees her occasionally at family events. They are polite. They do not pretend to be fine, which is its own kind of progress. Their mother has stopped trying to fix it, which is also progress. Whether the door will ever open again, Reese doesn't know. She has stopped trying to decide in advance. Some things need time that cannot be scheduled. She is willing to give it the time it needs, and not a day more than that. On a Tuesday evening in February, she was having dinner with a friend when someone at the bar caught her attention. Not Connor, just someone who moved through a room with that particular kind of ease that she now notices differently than she used to. She watched for a moment. Then she turned back to her dinner and her friend and the conversation that was actually happening in front of her. She is not finished trusting people. She has simply updated her research process. That, she thinks, is the correct response to most things. If this story found you somewhere you needed it, if you recognize something in the 47 seconds, or in the 11 days, or in the door that closed softly at Christmas, leave a comment. Tell me where you are in your story. Subscribe for new stories every week. See you next time. All stories on this channel are fictional narratives created for entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real persons, companies, or events is coincidental. This content is intended to explore themes of betrayal, research, and the specific grief of losing someone you expected more from.